Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dropkick for the Win, your semi-regular football podcast. What that regularity is probably less than most people poop.
It better be, or you have a problem.
So we're back. We are going to go over the draft. As you know, we did not do a free agency episode. Too bad. Get over it. It wasn't exciting.
Honestly, no, it wasn't, and the draft only made it make less sense. To be honest, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there are a couple teams whose free agency got even worse after you saw what they did in the draft.
Yeah. So let's kick things off with the first overall pick. To no one's surprise, Cam Ward from Miami went to the Tennessee Titans, who have been searching for a quarterback what seems like forever. They've had a few decent ones here and there, but really they've been struggling for a while to find a competent quarterback that they can build on. They had, I forget his name, but injuries kind of ruined his career a few years ago. I guess at this point, probably a decade ago. But yeah, they've been searching. That was been their big thing, is not being able to have a quarterback. This team is in a rebuild. Being able to find, hopefully, your franchise quarterback is huge. That's why quarterbacks are taken early in the draft, even if they're not necessarily the best overall player. And as usual, or as in this case, he wasn't considered the best overall player, but he was still considered worthy of a first overall pick. I think it's a bit of a debate over who was the best overall player. I could see Travis Hunter. I also see Abdul Carter being the best overall. Who would you have picked if you were just as a player that you thought was the best overall?
Yeah, Abdul Carter was number one on my board. He climbed up the boards as we went through the process. When I did the first draft show, I did. We did the overreaction draft right at the end of the year on the Hugo Boy podcast. Like and share, subscribe. And I actually wanted Abdul Carter to the Jets, at 7. And then as he got more and more hype, I went, oh, we lost my guy. So he was my number one all along. Travis Hunter's unique. I could see the argument for him more than Ward because it depends how you're going to use him. If you're going to put him on one side of the ball, he drops more like to 10. It's the unicornality, let's make up a word early in this episode, of him that really puts him up there. He does do, gosh, how do you not want to be his best friend watching him go up to the stage?
He seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah, he can be your return specialist on day one. He can be a leader on your team right away. So, no matter what, you're getting somebody who belongs, on the upper echelon of your 53-man roster, no matter what. But then if you can have them going in both directions, I can certainly see the argument for it. But for me, it was Carter 1, Hunter 2, all along.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I felt that pass rush is usually a very good thing to go after. I have to say, I don't think anyone was surprised pretty much by the first 4, even 5 picks. I think that you could, I don't know, maybe not regardless of the team's picking, but based off of the pick, off the players taken, this even throughout most of the first round, there wasn't too many head scratchers in this first round. None that I can think of. Maybe some that fell a little bit farther than expected. But it is, overall, I think that this draft the first round went mostly as expected. Maybe not necessarily the exact spot, but players picked in the first round for the most part were players people thought were going to go in the first.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done, if you haven't seen the two of us together before, we've literally covered entire NBA drafts before, from 1 down to 60. And if we tried to do that even for the first round of this thing, we would have been bored out of our minds. The trade towards the top of the draft was fun. Guess that tight end with the Colts and the Bears was pretty entertaining. But for the most part, this was about as chalk of a draft as you're going to get. Usually at least the Cardinals or Patriots are good for a guy you've never heard of at about 25th overall. Everyone pretty much did their job. Just go and look at any of the main websites. They're just, there's not that traditional team that got an F on their draft. There's not, Walter Football loves to use Millen as his grade for lower than F, right? Not a whole lot of Millens, just a whole lot of B pluses and Bs, and everyone seemed to play it safe. And I didn't like a lot of drafts, but I put most of my drafts at B minuses, Cs. Again, no one really failed the mission here. No one really excelled. The usual suspects. I think the Ravens had a great draft. The Packers had some entertaining picks, and we'll get to some of those in a little bit. But overall, it was a fairly vanilla event. And I mean, it's going to get protected. I mean, this will forever be the Shedeur Sanders draft. So, I mean, we're going to kind of forget that the other 256 picks were fairly boring in the grand scheme of things. So it'll go down as one of the quote greats as far as drafts go. But the NFL owes Shedeur Sanders and the Sanders family a thank you, because without him, this was a fairly boring experience.
Yeah, it was a snooze fest without that. So yeah. I mean, we'll get into that after. Let's finish at the top 5.
Absolutely.
Travis Hunter went number 2 in a little bit of a surprise trade. The Jacksonville Jaguars traded up from number 5 with the Cleveland Browns to select Travis Hunter, but also not a total surprise. Like, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like, they needed another weapon offensively. They could always use more help on their defense as well. And he's, was the number 1 wide receiver, and he was arguably the number 1/number 2 corner in the draft. So it made sense. Whether they, which position he will play more of, because he's going to play both. They already said that. He said he would only going to play in the NFL if he could do both. Obviously, I think that is more of a just, we'll see as his career goes, if he's able to continue doing both throughout a whole career. I think he can do it for like the first 5-6 years, no problem. But once you start getting older, it's just tougher on your body. But I see him being very valuable to this team. But there's no way he's going to be playing every down on both offense and defense. He'll have to pick one to be more of his special team, one to be like, maybe he becomes a nickel back or something like that, where there's packages for him on the defensive side that he's comes in for. That's my guess. I don't know. I'm not an NFL head coach. Surprise, surprise for those of you who thought I was.
Those who thought that was Andy Reid.
Sadly,
no, that's not. No, I'm with you, Tim. So they flat out said before the draft this trade was coming, and I actually thought I had it totally wrong. I'll be honest. I thought it was a smokescreen. I really thought what the Browns were trying to do was basically bluff the Giants into moving up one spot. With that threat of I'll send it to somebody, see if they could beat the Giants in either moving up to get Hunter or move up just to protect Carter. It turned out not to be a smokescreen. It was a real trade, and I think Cleveland. Jacksonville came right out and said, we're under, basically new management. We're not afraid anymore. We're going to play like we have nothing to lose. But honestly, the trade makes more sense, if not easily as much sense, for Cleveland, right? They're going nowhere. They're in quarterback hell. They're in salary cap hell. They're in everything hell. It makes sense to take a couple years. The AFC continues to be the loaded side, of the league. Take your time.
Division in particular.
Yeah, right. Take your time, build it up, do it right. If you stink every year, you still get to play the Jets every year. You still get to play the Jags, Titans, somebody bad in the AFC South every year. You still got a couple.
Or like this past year, the whole AFC South.
Yeah, right. You're never going to go 0-17, no matter how bad you want to be. I think it was right by both teams. I think Cleveland, kind of cleaned up nicely there. Getting that.
Yeah.
The way they did that. It was a good trade for both sides.
Yeah. I think Jacksonville had to do something, right? They're going into, is Trevor Lawrence is he our future or not? We need to get him a weapon to really figure this out. And if this blows up on our face, it's unfortunate we're losing our first round pick for next year, but they had to take this gamble, right? Like they're at this point in Trevor Lawrence's beginning of his career where they need to figure out what to do. Are we going to scrap everything entirely and start over? or are we, or do we have our guy like we thought we had when we drafted him first overall? 3-4 years, was it 4 years ago at this point? 5?
It's a while ago now. I'd have to check that out, but it was a while ago.
So they had to do something. So this makes sense, and makes sense for Cleveland. Cleveland's in a bit of a predicament. They have that terrible contract that they gave Deshaun Watson after trading for him, and that blew up in their face. And I think they're finally going to be able to, because they restructured it. I think next year they'll finally be able to get out of it. I think I could be wrong. It's hard to fully remember or to fully understand. I'm not Matthew Berry, or Andrew Berry, or any of the Berries really. But yeah, Cleveland had to do it. They know that the division's very tough. They know they're not winning in the AFC North. That's just too tough. Even with Pittsburgh not having a quarterback, that team is still very good. Cincinnati has possibly the best built weapons on offense. Maybe their offensive line's shaky, but their offense in general is just loaded with talent. And the Ravens, right? Like, they have a 2-time MVP at quarterback. They have a workhorse in Derrick Henry at running back. They have a great group of receivers, and their defense showed tons of improvement in the second half last year. So it was tough for Cleveland. So they trading back, getting more assets. They've done this in the back past, and it didn't work out, but that was with worse owners and worse GMs. I think that this is going to be beneficial, and we might finally see Cleveland in the next 2-3 years looking like a team that belongs in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at the AFC, listen, the Bills and Chiefs are in the playoffs. The Ravens are in the playoffs. Just lock it in. The Bengals were knocking on the door, and the Chargers were there. And they only got better, and they did what they needed to do in this draft. The Chargers getting a ton of, position player, fantasy player, what I mean, wide receiver, running back, tight end players in the draft. The Bengals attacking the trenches. I think they're locks. I think that's 5 teams now. I didn't necessarily believe in Denver last year, but they only got better. So if they made the playoffs and then got better, hey, look, there's another one. And then someone has to make it from the AFC South, right? So there are your 7 playoff teams. So if you're trying to push to be better than the Colts, to be better than the Patriots, to not finish 4th in the AFC North, what are you doing? You're setting yourself up to get the 13th pick in the draft, which is where I think a couple teams have set themselves up for already. And that's purgatory. That's Arizona Cardinal hell, we call it. And, at this point, do it right, stay in the bottom. There's no harm in that. Listen, if you're still a Browns fan, God bless you, but you're not going anywhere now, right? You've sat through everything else. Why would this be what turns you off? So I think I like what the Browns are doing here.
Yeah. Let's move over to number 3 overall pick, Abdul Carter to the Giants. I'm not surprised at all by this. This was kind of something I saw. Even if the Giants traded, the Giants trading up were never selecting a quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. Like they had in their mind they wanted Jackson Dart, and they knew that they could get him towards the end of the first round if they were able to trade back in to get him, and which is what they did. So they were never going to take a quarterback. This defense is going to have amazing pass rush, and they have a very good run defense as well. This team's defense is going to put them in positions to win, and they have enough. They don't really have much on offense. They have a couple players here and there. They will hopefully get better. They were able to get back in, by the way, and not lose next year's first round pick, which is great. So they can always use that, which at this point is probably going to be in that 13 range that Mongo was talking about. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think that this team is in that range in terms of moves that they made. And this coaching staff is a very good coaching staff. It's just, I think that their quarterbacks are finally better than Daniel Jones. And I think that that's enough to get this team into like 8-9 range, 8-9, 7 and whatever, is 10 type of record. But I like it. I think that this is going to be a fun, because what they got, I don't know, what's Thibodeau's first? That's his last name, right? The guy that they drafted the other, was it last year or the year before?
Kayvon Thibodeau.
Thank you. Who's also really good. That's going to be a nasty combo with those two.
And, I mean, it's Thibodeau, it's Burns, it's Carter. You know, the kid they added later in the draft there, Dexter Lawrence. I mean, they're trying to win games 10-3. I mean, this is one of the most boring teams on the planet right now. But you know, it's going to be effective. And adding Cam Scatterbo later in the draft, just to bash your face in over the middle 50 times a game, just adds to what they're doing. I mean, I think it's sort of a backdoor way of trying to protect the coach and the GM's jobs. But there's not a whole lot the coach can do with this team. He can just say, we're going to try and out-bully you. I mean, there's not a whole lot of depth. There's not a whole lot of creativity. You know, and I think in a world where Jackson Dart's not going to contribute this year, so you can't really judge Dable on what happens this year anyway, because the whole point was he gets one more shot with his quarterback. You know, I don't think it's a terrible strategy to sort of further try and sell the safety of these guys. Now the Giants will definitely get some heat. You know, a team that has historically never gone with an African-American quarterback, you know, wouldn't trade up for Cam Ward, didn't get in on the Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes and actually traded up to take Jackson Dart, you know, which many people think was a reach. The Falcons do everyone a favor, by the way, trading their first round pick next year for a guy who's not necessarily the cleanest of personalities, you know, and James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, you know, makes every trade look. Anyone who traded up in this draft looks like a winner because they didn't do what Atlanta did. And I get that Atlanta desperately needs pass rushers, but Atlanta with one of the ultimate hold my beer moves of all time, right? The Giants have a questionable trade up for Jackson Dart, and Atlanta says, I'm going to make everyone forget how weird of a trade that was right after them. So, you know, thank you to the Falcons for, you know, on behalf of Giant fans anywhere. But listen, I love this Giant defense. I like about 3/11 of this Giant offense. You definitely know what they're doing next year, right? They can just draft on offense 7 times, right? But it's ultimately, you know, we know the story now with the Giants. Jackson Dart develops, and this team is very good in a couple years, or Jackson Dart doesn't develop. And we are talking about the Giants' new coaching hire in a couple years, and that's pretty much the 2 possible outcomes here.
Yep. All right, let's move on to probably the pick that make the most sense. And I know that sounds silly, but Will Campbell to the Patriots. They need offensive line help. He's a typical New England Patriots type of offensive lineman where he can play multiple spots on the offensive line. He's expected to be their left tackle. There are concerns that his arms are short, but I think that that's silly, as he was able to do it in college against some. I understand the NFL is better, is different. I do understand that, but he was effective in college. It's not like his arms are so short. They're, you know, below the line, but that's the same thing with hand size, right? Like, you have ideal numbers that you would like, but nothing. If the guy hits every other check mark, are you going to be like, sorry, your arms aren't long enough?
No, I mean, the fact that this pick was never in question, right? I mean, a few people, you know, we're looking at Armand Membo, you know, who eventually went to the Jets, maybe sneaking in there. But, you know, this was their pick all along. And the fact that nobody thinks that's outrageous tells you that this is just, you know, hyping for the sake of hyping, right? You got to hedge your bets in case he somehow doesn't turn out. But I tell you what, the one thing, credit to the Patriots here, the one thing that you could knock them during their, you know, dynastic run with Belichick is they had some wacky drafts along the way. And part of that is because they were always drafting, you know, 32, 29. I mean, part of it was they were coming from a place of insecurity. But, you know, obviously it's not been easy without Belichick. But how about, you know, look at this draft, right down the shopping list, right? Needed an offensive tackle, boom, first round. Needed a running back, Henderson, boom, second round. Needed a wide receiver, Williams, third round, boom. They just went right down the list. And it really, you know, a lot of, you know, publications out there have the Patriots as the winner, if not one of the winners of this draft. And I actually disagree with a lot of losers out there. You know, the Panthers have been getting some guff. I think that's wrong. I actually like the draft the Commanders had, a couple others, but, But that one I agree with. I think the Patriots were one of the clear winners of this draft, starting with this pick and just going, it was surgical. That's a word I've been using a lot lately with my students, trying to encourage them, be surgical sometimes in the way you act. And the Patriots just went out and did what they needed to do.
Yeah, they certainly did. And I think that this is something that they needed to do, and it worked. It should hopefully work out for them. Obviously, you never know, anything can happen. A player could just, happens. On to the end of the top 5, Mason Graham, defensive tackle to the Cleveland Browns. This makes sense. Cleveland needs to Cleveland is trying to have they have to stop the offenses, right? Like, you're dealing with Lamar, you're dealing with Joe Burrow. Having a good defensive tackle is only going to help this team. I like it. I don't know who. I know everyone was like, "Oh, Cleveland should go get a quarterback." Well, I mean, ultimately they did.
They got two.
They did. They did. But I mean, at the same time, they weren't going to go get Ashton Genty. They weren't. They don't need a running back right now. They're not in that spot. That would have been like when the Giants got Saquon. Right, like the team wasn't ready for that player. Questions about whether or not that made sense for Oakland, that's irrelevant. But like, who else would they? Maybe they could have gotten an offensive lineman, but their offensive line is pretty solid. I think that ultimately this made the most sense. Thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I held up 2 there because it was a super deep running back draft, but they went out and got 2 running backs too, right? They got Sampson from Tennessee and they got Judkins, right? They go out and they get Harold Fannin, which makes little sense in a world where they've, re-upped with Joku. They went out and they got Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Dylan Gabriel has this kind of all I do is win, underrate me at your own risk mentality. And Sanders, who is literally being, trashed by everybody, right? Couldn't be more different. It's one of the most wild drafts in recent memory as a team. And so going out and getting Graham at the top of this thing to just anchor that, right? At the end of the day, this is the Mason Graham draft class for the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, like I said before, we're going to remember it as the Shedeur Sanders draft. We're going to remember this as Shedeur Sanders' entry into Cleveland. But in terms of who is the identity of this draft class, who set the table for the entire draft, that would be the guy who gets drafted first, because it all snowballs from there. And taking a guy to anchor what is one of the most volatile looking draft boards I've ever seen, if not I have ever seen, I think was really smart of them. And to basically get paid to take one of the safer top 10 picks in the draft, you got to appreciate what they did, even if all hell broke loose starting in round 2 for them.
That's fair. Now let's just talk about it. Cleveland has a very weird quarterback room.
It's wild. It is weird is the right word for it.
I don't quite understand what they were doing. So let me just they have Deshaun Watson, obviously, that right. They traded for Kenny Pickett, who's on his 3rd team in like 4 years or whatever. They signed Joe Flacco. Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Gabriel. They drafted him. And then Shedeur Sanders. Who's not making the run? Like, you're not carrying 5 quarterbacks into a season. You typically don't carry more than 2, sometimes 3. Who are the 2 to 3 who are losing out? You drafted 2 rookie quarterbacks. You're not going to. There's no way they're going to keep both, right? They're going to see who that. Well, we all know this. Shedeur Sanders was most likely drafted because the owner stepped in, right? Like, if you watch the pick going in, and you see Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, right? That's their GM.
Sure.
They are
about the story.
They're not celebrating. They don't even look happy that they made that pick. Now, it could be because it was day 3 and they're just tired or whatever, but that's how it felt. Which is weird, getting arguably the 2nd ranked quarterback in the draft in the 5th round and being sad about it is a very weird thing. But the whole thing, I get that teams wanted to make an example of him, right? Like that was the whole thing with Sanders, was did not like his attitude. They didn't like his father's attitude, and they wanted to make an example. But going into this, he was viewed as a 1st-round quarterback. Correct? I'm not crazy. Most of the sites I saw had him being drafted in the 1st round. They had him as the 2nd quarterback or 3rd quarterback coming off the board.
Yeah.
So it seemed super weird that his stock plummeted so much that he went into the 5th round. I can see him not going in the 1st. Teams want to show, want to set a precedent to him that it's not okay to that you're trying to bully us. Why did he go into day 3? What take him in the 2nd round, take him in the 3rd round. The guy's talent is there, right? Like all the major websites were like, no, this guy's actually good. He should go, he should pan out in the NFL. Yeah, he doesn't have the biggest arm, but he's a very accurate quarterback. He has very good pocket presence. He has all the tools, other than he's not the most mobile quarterback in the world, but he's not immobile. So it made no sense that he fell all the way to 5th, other than the allegedly there was issues with the interviews with him, which to my understanding was he knew he did not want to go to certain teams, and he intentionally, and again, this is alleged, intentionally had bad interviews.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants came right out and said the moment that they were out on him. So, I mean, some teams are flat out saying it. Some teams are holding their cards. Now, remember, you have some teams, like, for example, this draft could have been 100 rounds, and the Chiefs, with Mahomes as 1 and Minshew as 2, were not drafting Shedeur Sanders, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's when he goes, whatever pick he ended up going, he went 144, right? He went in the 5th round. That wasn't 143 people passing on Shedeur Sanders. A large chunk of that 143 are people who were never taking him, and that's true of all, of all teams, right? If you have a center and a viable backup interior lineman, you're not drafting the best center in the league. In the draft, it doesn't matter if he falls to the 7th round. So it is going to always be seen a little misleadingly in the sort of look back on this historic draft. I don't have the answer for you at the end of the day, though, as to what caused the drop to this level, other than when you start to put those pieces together that you mentioned, and then add in the fact that most of those 143 were never a viable option for him. It's really more like the 21st chance he could have been drafted, the 25th chance he was. I mean, if you only believe 8 teams were looking anyway at him realistically, and then he went into the 6th round, okay, fine, whatever. That's the 48 at max. But like, once Tennessee takes Cam Ward, they're not looking at Shedeur Sanders anymore, right? That's what makes Cleveland taking Dillon Gabriel. And honestly, I think that's part of why they're so upset, because even if you want Shedeur Sanders at that point and you're in the Cleveland Browns room, you're sitting there going, then why on earth did we waste a 3rd rounder on Dillon Gabriel, right? I want my 3rd rounder back at that point, even if I wanted Shedeur Sanders in the 2nd round to begin with. So there's a lot of reasons to be upset if you're a Browns, office person at that point. There's a lot of reasons to be upset if you're a Browns fan at that point. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, Kilroy. You got a guy who, I know we're going to talk about your Ravens here in just a minute. Anytime you can get a guy who at least somebody wrote on their first 32 predictions outside of the top 32, like your Ravens did, we'll talk spoiler, you have to consider that a victory, right? And so if I'm a Browns fan, I'm happy. Now, back to your question, it really starts with Shedeur Sanders. If Sanders balls out, Dillon Gabriel, you could easily see a world where he goes to the practice squad. And it just keeps going like that, right? If anyone earns the starting job, Joe Flacco does not have a job. Joe Flacco is solely there as the 5th guy who can do it if you need to do it. So, like, if Shedeur Sanders proves that he can be a week 1 starting quarterback, Gabriel and Flacco are gone. That's the end of the conversation, right? If Sanders can't do it, if Sanders completely stinks, if Sanders just refuses to show up and he's out, well, then everyone moves up 1, right? And now the pressure's on Gabriel. If Gabriel can make the team, Flacco's out, right? If Pickett can start, Flacco's out, Gabriel goes down, right? It's just going to kind of go sort of reverse ageism there. I guess technically ageism, right? Because older people are normally the ones aged against.
Yeah.
But either way, they're going to kind of look at the highest ceiling first and see how high up can that guy get. And then once they filled all the spots, anyone who's left, they'll move on from is ultimately my prediction of what they'll do.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. Let's move on to our teams.
Sure.
And how our teams did. Let's start with your team. Your team had the lower draft, higher pick, is what I meant to say. Let me pull up their draft and we'll go over it. Boop-a-doo. I forgot to get yours. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I got mine ready. All right, here we go. So first pit round, 7th overall pick. They go out and get a offensive tackle whose name I'm not going to say because I don't want to butcher it.
Fair enough.
Arguably the number one offensive tackle in the class, but I believe he is suited for the right side of the offensive line.
He is a right tackle, yes, 100%.
So that was also part of why he did not go to New England, to my understanding, because New England is looking for a left tackle because their tackle that they drafted recently to play left tackle is better at right. So that was New England's plan. The Jets have needed to upgrade their offensive line. I like this move, this pick. I think most Jets fans like this pick. I can't imagine they don't. It wasn't necessarily flashy, but I think what the Jets need to do is they need to just build, right? And you have I don't know. Do they have their quarterback of the future?
No.
Do they?
No, they don't. Do I like this pick? No, I don't.
Just you tell me everything. You go over your team.
You can be as optimistic as you want over there. Listen. I'm not a fan of what we've done here at all. I think this move. You alluded to it, Kilroy. I think this move reeks of fear. There was a clear drop off. Offensive tackle was one of the shallowest positions in this draft. And so they said, we need to get that out of the way. Personally, listen, if you're a Jet fan out there and you disagree with me, I get it, but at least humor me with this experiment. Jedrick Wills, Browns tackle from last year, disgruntled, did not like being on the Browns, was not healthy. That's why he's getting no respect. That's why he's still a free agent. Just go out and imagine you signed Jedrick Wills to a 1-year contract and you put him on the right side. Now go do a mock draft and see how much happier you are. We basically gave up our first-round pick because we forced ourselves to be handcuffed to a tackle. And even worse, he's a tackle who is a little bit of a workout warrior, which we know we traditionally have never done well with. He's a guy who developed a little bit later in his high school career, which we know we've never particularly done well with. He's a guy who, they say that if nothing else, he'd make a very good guard if we have to put him in. So Philadelphia Eagles, enjoy this guy being a Pro Bowler on your team in 2031. And he's a guy who his weakness is that occasionally he just gets completely annihilated on a play. He literally just whiffs on a block. Weakness. That's a pretty glaring weakness. And, when you have a guy learning a new system with a new offensive coordinator, and a running back who, listen, I'm not going to call Breece Hall injury prone. He had the one bad injury, but we're not starting the Cal Ripken Iron Man streak counter on him either, right? I mean, this is not a team that's necessarily built to take its lumps, and it's definitely not a team with a talented enough offense that can be getting to 2nd and 12, 2nd and 13, and have a puncher's chance of getting out of that. Anytime this dude misses a coverage on first down, you might as well just punt on second. That's not the kind of guy you need. And then the other problem is this is now a team with zero direction. I have no idea what the Jets are doing. And I'm sorry.
You talked about that before, right? Like you did not like their coach signing.
No, I liked their coach signing, but then I don't like what they've done. I always liked Aaron Glenn. I didn't like their offensive coordinator signing.
That's right. Yeah.
Because part of what he's a little bit of a unicorn coming off that Ben Johnson tree. You need certain personnel, and The thing is, I literally, I'm sorry, I apologize, Corey. I'm going to go ahead because I kind of need to cover the whole draft here. We can go person by person if you want, if you need to.
Nope.
But, they go out and they in free agency get Cisco from Jacksonville, Stevens from Baltimore, your guys, right? 2 defensive backs who look like they need the Aaron Glenn magic. And then what do they do in this draft? They go out and they get seemingly one of the most NFL-ready corners and safeties you can find on day 2 and day 3. Right? They go out and they get the wide receiver from Georgia, who's, your deep threat. Well, we've seen Alan Lazard do nothing for 2 years. And if you believe that you have a spot for a guy like that on this team with this O-line still being unreliable, you have Alan Lazard, right? It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why do you go and replace a guy you don't think is effective unless you don't believe that that position is effective, right? So I don't understand what they were doing in this draft. And honestly, I give the draft itself, again, I'm not saying Membu is a complete waste. I like the guy in the grand scheme of things. I think he'd be more useful on the 31 other teams, to be quite honest. I give this draft a B-, but to me, it gives free agency a hard F. I think everything they did in free agency is now completely meaningless. I don't think he's the right tackle for Fields. I think it makes the 2 defensive back signings completely meaningless. It definitely confirms that Josh Reynolds is truly our wide receiver too, and our more route controlled runner, right? Garrett Wilson's going to be our chain mover. Reynolds is going to be our short guy, and the kid from Georgia is going to be our deep guy, Arian Smith. That's a terrible receiving core. And based on the fact that they all do something different, suggests that all of their roles are safe. We're going in with Reynolds and Arian Smith as 2 of our 3 starting wide receivers. That's atrocious. The only reason I like it is because it's bad, and I had Arch Manning as my dream pick in 2026 anyway. But guess what? Still better than some of the AFC South, still better than the Cleveland Browns. And I'm really dreading the sound of, with the 13th pick in the 2026 draft, the New York Jets select, because we're dangerously close to it right now. And with a couple June 1st cap casualty buy-ins, we could be dangerously close to a lock to go 7-10, and I hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, the Ravens. How about the Ravens? They had a classic Ravens draft.
I love this draft.
I as well love this draft. Malachi Starks, huge pickup in the first round. The guy was supposed to be top 10 pick, to my understanding. Top 15, whatever. Fell to number 27. They desperately needed help with their safeties. This guy should be able to come in and start for them. And I love it. Mike Green in the second. I will say this: the Ravens always seem to be able to pick players who should be good in the second round and never pan out. They never pan out. I have no idea why. They have a second round curse. Hopefully, Mike Green can break that curse. I'm not confident, not because of his talent, just because it hasn't happened yet. You had Sergio Kindle. There's other guys. I'm just not going to go list them all, mostly because I don't remember them. Sergio Kindle popped into my brain, but he was a second round pick. I'm almost certain.
I'll trust you. Correct him if he's wrong. But hey, Kilroy, here's why. Remember, it's not our job to be right or wrong at this point. It's our job to just do basic math, to just use our eyes and say that was a hell of a draft or it wasn't. Listen, on April 15th, less than 10 to 12 days before the draft, Nick Wright had Mike Green going at 17 and Malachi Starks going at 24. You got those 2 guys at 27 and 59. This is an A+ draft. I don't care what happens. If you can have, highly acclaimed professional, people putting both of these guys in the top 25, and you can get both of them outside of the top 25, you had an A+ draft. I don't really care what happens after that, especially when those are 2 positions of need for the team. Now, I'll add this. When I was asked, again, You Go Boy podcast, check it out, like, share, subscribe. When I was asked over there, what should the Jets do at 7? I said, get the hell out of there. Trade down and get far enough down that you can take Malachi Starks. He was about number 5 on my big board overall. So I am very jealous you got him. Pairing him with Kyle Hamilton is dumb. Mike Green, you've needed an edge rusher. You definitely need a second. You're absolutely right. The first round they always nail, right? The Ravens and Eagles, and usually more often than not the Steelers, Just let the guy who's falling fall into their lap. But day 2 has not been as much of a lock for the Ravens as some other teams. I think they nailed it here. And listen, just going down the line, I love what
They're
they did
great.
with Emory Jones.
They are a great day 3 team.
Yeah. But Emory Jones in round 3, right? Day 2. I love that pick. They actually doubled down on LSU offensive linemen. So that's nice. 2 guys, who kind of know each other in summer camp. I love what they did here.
I really like that. The Ravens did need to start looking at offensive line. They have a left tackle. They have a center. Their guards have been very questionable, and they don't quite have a right tackle. Will Emory Jones become a day 1 starter? I don't know, but at least you brought someone in who has that ability to do it. I like picking up Tyler Loop. This if he performs half decent, this allows them to have a nice clean break with Justin Tucker, who they did. I'm waiting for them to move on from, and this allows them to. Hopefully he does. Hopefully he is good. You don't know. You're hoping kickers are unfortunately some of the biggest question marks when coming into when getting drafted, right? But if they took him in 6th round, that's a good gamble. Hopefully he's good enough, and this allows that break. They have to do this. I think that it was necessary.
If you don't know what's going on with Justin Tucker, just Google it. That's your homework. But the bottom line is the man gives us the ickies. And in a world where the Cleveland Browns, you look at what they did in this draft, and socially between Watson and Sanders, you go, what is this team doing? And then you look at a team like the Bears, who, they take Loveland over Warren when Warren is kind of the more gadgety tight end, would be nice for Ben Johnson. But then in the 2nd round, take Burden over a guy like Trey Harris, the more gadgety player. And you go, what are we doing? Are we a gadget offense, or are we a serious offense? Right? There are teams that you can question on the field. There are teams that you can question off the field. As seemingly meaningless as taking the 2nd kicker off the board in the 6th round is, this is why the Ravens are a proud franchise. This is why, as a Raven fan, you can be proud, because there is a clear message here, right? This is obvious what we are doing. This is obvious what's about to happen. And it's the right move, to be quite honest. Listen, I've had Justin Tucker on my fantasy team for a zillion years. When my league reopens, he's my first cut. I'm in on this. I think this is the right move for the Ravens. I'm probably drafting this dude in my rookie draft, see if I can get the next Raven kicker for a zillion years. Listen, what Justin Tucker did on the field was impressive, but when it's time to move on, this is what good franchises do, right? This is why the Patriots were a dynasty for 18, 19 years, because when it's time to go, it is time to go for one reason or another, on the field or off the field. And, you look at some teams that stink every year, and you can see why when their draft leaves you with more questions than answers. This draft is very telegraphed from top to bottom, with the kicker probably being the greatest example of it.
Yeah. And overall, I really do like the Ravens draft. I don't, I can't really complain. I would like to eventually see the Ravens at the end of in the day 3 to maybe look at bringing in a quarterback, not to build for the future necessarily, but to have someone you could develop into a good backup quarterback, right? That's the only thing that the Ravens really haven't had, is they've had a bit of a revolving door. When they get a good, decent backup, they tend to go elsewhere. And I kind of want the Ravens to find someone, because let's be honest, if Lamar goes down, the team's just not the same. And that's not because the team's not good. That's just how good Lamar is.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. In terms of depth, in terms of needs, I mean, the fact that, granted, one of them is going to be converted to a receiver, but when the Raiders are literally taking 2 quarterbacks over the course of 3 picks on day 3, there were quarterbacks to go around. With that being said, I do need to give the Ravens and actually the Panthers, they move up a couple notches on my draft board here. We saw last year, right? The Washington Huskies had like 5 wide receivers. You didn't know who was what level of talent, right? Polk ends up getting drafted before Jalen McMillan, and Jalen McMillan actually ends up having the way better year and is pretty good for Tampa Bay. We have no idea what these Colorado wide receivers are who all came out this year in the draft, because we really don't know what Shedeur Sanders is and how much Travis Hunter was eating up, his fill of the ball over there. So any team that got a piece of the Colorado receiving core. Baltimore got Webster, I think, in either round 6 or round 7. The Panthers got Jimmy Horn. Seattle got the third guy. I forget his name right now, but one of those guys has to be good, right? There's no way that Shedeur Sanders was making 3 guys who are that terrible look that good at times last year. One of them has to be NFL talent. So I think that was a real smart flyer this year. Just like I would have taken a flyer on Polk and McMillan last year. I would have been wrong if I ended up with Polk, but I would have taken the flyer. I ended up taking both of them at different times in fantasy leagues. I was right about McMillan for dynasty purposes. I was wrong about Polk. It is what it is. But I actually,
we don't know. It could still change.
That's true. It could still pan out. It could still change. A lot can happen. It's only a rookie year. But again, I liked that. I loved that strategy from the beginning. So of course the Jets didn't do it, of getting in on the Buffalo receiving core, and good job on the Ravens for recognizing that and for the Panthers and Seahawks as well there.
Yeah. Overall, what was your biggest surprise of the draft?
It's got to be a tie here. So I'm going to take Sanders out of it because I think we're all.
Yeah.
There's so many. Something about it has to surprise you, right? It's a telenovela in and of itself. Something in there has to surprise you. So take Sanders out of that for a minute. To me, it's how devastating this receiving core was in terms of its final placement. This is a dynasty fantasy player's nightmare. I mean, Egbuka going to Tampa Bay to be one of 4 starting wide receivers is a fantasy nightmare. Houston takes the entire Iowa State receiving core, and they'll be useful for a year with Tank Dell coming back for an injury. But you still have Nico Collins there. You still have Dell there. That's trouble. The Chargers, yes, I know that they have plenty of needs. But they go out and after already taking Omarion Hampton to make them more of a running team, they go out and they take 2 very strong fantasy possible wide receivers. So it kind of it felt like a lot of teams had no real. Greg Cleveland, we talked about, doubles down at quarterback and running back. It felt like teams were kind of being more gluttonous than normal. I feel like there's usually a lot better as a fantasy investor. I feel like there are usually a lot better. I leave the draft feeling better based on fits than my initial big board was. My big board shrunk tremendously watching this draft. And, maybe some people will develop and beat out veterans, but, we just haven't seen it in a while, and that's what caught me so off guard. But this thing was a fantasy nightmare.
Do you think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was such an underwhelming free agent class?
I think it might have. I also think we have seen a really rough run of injuries lately. And I think teams, if you're Tampa Bay, Mike Evans is getting really, really up there. Chris Godwin has, had that nasty injury. I get it. I understand why you would do it. If you're Houston, you have to protect your, investment this year. If you got to let Tank Dell have a full time to get back, I get it. I understand it. But at the same time, I think I definitely do think teams are, sort of trying to make up ground from free agency, but I do think it's more so, sort of fear of injuries, to be quite honest. I think teams are starting to adjust more for that. You've added an extra game, right? Less preseason. People are coming in less in shape and then playing a longer year by a week. I think that factors in, but at the same time, hey, look, let us have our fun, man. Give us some better fits next year, NFL. Not cool.
All right. And do you have a biggest praise?
Biggest praise?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the question? Man, it's tough to not want to say the Ravens. I really love what they did in those top 2, but we talked about them in depth. I really do like what the Panthers did. I know I alluded to them a lot today, but I think just to break it down a little bit more, listen, I think Ted McMillan, I think, becomes a true number 1 there. We saw Bryce Young develop. And listen, the one knock against Ted McMillan is his heart in it. With all due respect to Charlotte, there's not a whole lot to do there. It's not like he's going to Miami where he's going to go party on the weekends. Like, he's going to be a football player. He's going to be a blue collar functional guy, get it done. Adding 2 defensive ends on day 2 and adding the big kid from Florida, Cam Jackson, on day 3, when that defense was an absolute dumpster fire, was terrible. Adding Mitchell Evans, the tight end from Notre Dame, coming off. I think it was an ACL, might have been a UCL tear, but he's not ready right away. But that's awesome because basically it puts Jatavian Sanders on blast, right? He has to develop this year, or Mitchell Evans is coming in his sophomore year to take his job. A lot of good sneaky moves by Carolina. And I think when there are so many teams, like the one thing you can say about Baltimore is their draft was very top heavy, right? I think Carolina did a really good job of each pick just had a little bit of sneakiness to it where you go, okay, I appreciate that. I see the story. And part of it is when your team's that bad, you can keep adding picks without it being just silly or redundant, right? Like by round 2, the Eagles were taking guys that you were like, sure, why not? Right. So in a way, it's a knock against the Panthers, but I do appreciate forget about it as fantasy numbers, forget about it as humans for a minute. Think of it as storytelling, right? Whose draft tells the best story of where the franchise is and where the franchise wants to go? I think the Panthers did a fantastic job of that.
Fair enough. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on another episode of Dropkick for the Win. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment down below who your winner and losers were from this draft. Take care.